Faith has played a large role in how we came to be, how our team has grown, and how I even had any inkling to get involved in this. And I'm going to start off by telling you a story about a recalculated route. And what I mean by that is, do you remember when cell phones came out with that great GPS program? And if you made a wrong turn, what did it say? Recalculating route. I think that woman kept getting mad because it seemed to me that her voice got more and more annoyed when I wasn't following her directions. But the point being, it would tell you where to go. And it would, if you didn't go that way, it would tell you, make a U-turn, do whatever you need to do. My life has kind of been like that. When I got out of high school, I decided I'd go to college. And I did for 3 days. Didn't like it. Thought it was kind of, particularly Western Man. Western Man was terrible. I got a D on my first assignment, quit, and went back to the beach. And so, with all that said, I wasn't sure what to do, so I went to work with Sears and Roebuck, where I thought, you know what, at least I can make some money and go surfing. And so there came a point in time where a guy named, now here's what I'm going to tell you. There are people who recalculated my route. And a lot of times God will put people in your path to change the direction of your life. So I was working, and this guy, Doug Nelson, came up and he said, Rob, we got to join the National Guard. I looked at him, I said, what do you mean we? He said, my lottery number, it's 265. I mean, it's number 1. I said, mine's 265, dude. I'm not going anywhere. What do I need to join the Guard for? Oh, I don't want to go alone. Come on, let's go. So my dad knew somebody that was a commander. I went and talked with the commander. He said, well, we've got infantry. I said, okay, that's one option. What else do you have? And he said, well, we have an MP unit. I said, okay, if I can get into an MP unit, then I'll go. So Doug and I joined the Virginia Army National Guard, 229th Military Police Battalion. For me, that's when God started his plan for what 41 years later launched. And so went off and became an MP. You're a weekend warrior. And so I thought, well, I can make more money selling TVs at JCPenney's. So I jumped to the competitor, was selling TVs and stereos. Nick would not like the way I was selling them. We created 2 or 3 different ways to finance those bad boys, and they were going to pay them till Jesus came back. But the point being, I sold TVs and stereos. And one day a friend of mine, Tommy Crislip, and his partner, Tommy Nuttycombe, walked up. And they were with Norfolk Police. They were store security. And Tommy says, one of the Tommies, said, you're an MP, right? I said, yeah. Said, well, Norfolk's hiring. I said, what? He said, police. Why don't you come be with us? I said, okay, I can do that. So I left JCPenney's and became a police officer with Norfolk Police. Now, there is a twist to this story. I went to get my physical, and this guy named Mr. Ward, I don't know how I remember his name, but he said, well, you're not going to be able to be a police officer. You wear glasses. And I thought, well, that's not cool. So I had an eye exam scheduled for the next day. You know how they turn those little wheels and the different lens, and then all of a sudden you see the little pinhole, and you can see perfect with that. And I said, well, how does that work? He said, well, it eliminates the peripheral vision. And I thought, aha. So I went back to Mr. Ward. I said, Mr. Ward, I want to take the physical. He said, how are you going to pass the eye exam? I said, don't worry about it. Well, you can't use corrective lens. Not at all. So I went in, the nurse closed the door, and she said, I want you to read the eye chart. And I said, just to be clear, I can't use corrective lens, right? That means contact lens or glasses, right? And she's looking at me like I'm crazy. So I reached in my pocket and I pulled out these 2 cardboard round circles that I had stuck in the center with a big pen, creating that pinhole. So I put them up to my eyes. I read the eye chart left and right. She said, what is this? I said, not a corrective lens. So I passed the eye exam, went out to Mr. Ward, handed him the paper. He said, "How did you do that?" I said, "I just passed the test. I don't know what to tell you." So I went on the Norfolk Police Department. You never knew that, did you?
I've heard the story.
Okay. While I was on the department, the first little bit of time, I may not have been a nice guy. I was trained by guys that came on in the 50s and 60s, and we always had a solution for things. It was physical. And all of a sudden, I got a partner, this new partner. I was out of field training, and Drew was in our same precinct, and we started talking, and you tell him how we met.
Well, when I first met Rob, he was in a unit called the 5th Platoon that did undercover type, plainclothes type activity and so forth. And I came from a long history of law enforcement family. My father had been a police officer. My father was a deputy chief on the department. I came on the department. And a number of different officers, their sons and so forth, were officers as well. And a lot of people, with your father being a ranking officer, did not want to talk to you, different officers and so forth, for obvious reasons. They kind of shunned you a bit. But I happened to be at the gas pumps, gassing up the police car, and Rob happened to be there. We got talking a little bit, found out we knew his wife. I had gone to school with her for a short time, and became good friends after that. So that kind of developed and started our relationship.
He went to high school with my wife, so I go home and, "You remember Drew Grant?" Yeah. I said, "Well, he's on a PD." And, I want to say this. Drew's dad was a cop's cop. I mean, this is a guy that started out walking a beat, worked his way up to chief, and he was a godly man, started a Bible study. So as time went on, Drew and I became partners, and we worked together in uniform. I drove slowly so Drew wouldn't get nervous. Maybe that's not exactly accurate, but we had a lot of fun together. We did a lot of exciting things, made a lot of arrests. And then Drew ended up going to the detective bureau and gave me a leg up and helped me get up there, and told them I wasn't as crazy as they thought I was, I guess. And we started working together in the detective bureau. But the key point of our relationship I can't overlook. We were out one night, and there was this kid that was mouthy, and he was starting to get physical, and I reached out and grabbed him by his neck and drew back to hit him. And I hear this voice, and all of a sudden there's a hand on my shoulder. And I looked, and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "What are you talking about? I'm going to hit the guy." He said, "Why are you going to hit him?" Now, the kid must have thought it was candy camera. And he says, "Why don't you choose not to?" As sure as I'm sitting here, Serve and Protect would never, ever have been born if it wasn't for him. God used him to question me, put me at a crossroads, and said, "Where are you going to go?" We both know a lot of officers who went the other direction. I can name them. Drew can name them. One was an 18-year-old cop that worked with me. Ended up killing his wife, ex-wife, and her boyfriend. He's in prison for the rest of his life. I knew a kid I went to junior high school with. He called one day and said his wife had committed suicide. She shot herself in the back. Well, that really doesn't work. And so a week later he called while he was under investigation. Well, he didn't call, but his landlord called. He had committed suicide because he knew what he had done. But the point I'm making is sometimes God brings people into our lives to change our lives and to give us an opportunity, if we'll listen, to go the direction which he's calling us in. Drew was that person. We started talking about all kinds of things, about our families, about faith. We went to a Bible study together that his dad started. He must have had, 150 people coming to that thing?
Pretty close. Every Wednesday, he would do a breakfast, actually, for law enforcement, firefighters, first responders. And it developed out with a pastor at one of the local churches here. in Norfolk, and but he would every weekly have that study, and obviously me being a part of that. And I was fortunate to have been raised in a religious home. My parents always raised me to do the right thing. Having come from a history of law enforcement, and to give a plug to the other side, my brother became a battalion chief on the fire department in Norfolk. So we used to kind of make fun of the firefighters a little bit as the police officers, but
No.
but that they sat around, washing their cars and waiting for something to happen all the time. But that's not really true. But in any way, we had a good time with that, and fortunately, I think God worked it together for Rob and I to be put together and work together, and we did for a number of years. And I was raised to, my father always taught me to treat people the way you wanted to be treated. And that's what I've always lived by, the same way. So obviously when Rob, who was a little rough around the edges when we first started working together, I had to hold him back a little bit and try to talk to him and explain that to him. So
He's being kind. And by the way, just so you don't, in case you don't know, firefighters make fun of us too. Am I right? Am I right? But let me just say this. A police officer or a firefighter would take a bullet for each other. We're brothers. We do the same thing in different ways. We save lives. We serve families. So I moved on in life. It was 1978. I was a detective. Loved it. We were closing cases like crazy. I went to hear a guy speak named Dan DeHaan. He was at a church, Tabernacle Church, and he was a cool guy. Had a beard and longer hair, so he must know what he's talking about because it was 1978. And so I heard him mention a college, Columbia Bible College, and I thought, I need to go there. And I told my wife, I think I need to go there. And she said, I think you need to be called. And I said, I think I was, but I'm not sure. So I applied, with all of my college experience. I applied and got in. That shocked me. And I figured that must be verification because there's no other way I got in. But we went down there, longer hair than they were accustomed to. We pulled up in front of registration. I opened the door. My dogs jumped out and jumped into their fountain. Yep, we made a real good first impression. But the point being, that's where I went. And for me, it was like spiritual rehab. Because where I had been and what I had seen was horrible. I had seen a lot of bad things. We saw a lot of bad things together. Now, we saw some fun things together. Now, I'm going to tell you this. We're out one night, we get a call. This guy says, yeah, somebody broke into my house and he stole some clothes. So we get out there, we're detectives, we're all suited up, and this house was just a shack. And you go up a couple of steps and open the screen door, and we went in, and I said, yeah, so somebody stole something? And the guy goes, yeah, my red pants. Okay. I said, where were your red pants? And he pointed to a table. I said, so they were laying on the table? He said, they stole my red pants and now they're blue. And I said, uh-oh. And I said, where were your red pants? And he pointed to a picture. He said, they were red and now they're blue. He's backed out of the door by now, and I'm trying to back out the door, and he's got his hand up on the screen. And I looked around, and I said, I swear I'll shoot you right where you stand. But we ran into a few crazy people. So the job has its fun elements. We could stay here all night and tell stories. But the point being, I go to Columbia Bible College from that world, and let me tell you, it was culture shock. They didn't allow you to go out on Sunday and eat dinner, and I was back then. You couldn't shoot hoops on Sunday and all of that stuff. But it changed my life. It reshaped my mind, just as it said earlier, be transformed. And so I was finishing up Columbia Bible College. I would go out and do some speaking. Got into radio for 3 years. I was a weekend announcer. And so I learned some new skills. And my wife's dad had gone to Wheaton College, and I thought, I'm 32 years old. I better keep this ball rolling or I'll not go back again. So I went to Wheaton to get a master's in communications. Met a guy named David Maines. David Main said, well, if you're going to Wheaton, why don't you work for my dad's agency that he just stole? I said, for what? He said, well, you can go in and work inside. I said, man, I don't have a creative bone in my body. I said, nah, let's do this. What else do they have? Well, you can drive a truck. So I go in and meet with the general manager. Now, he was, prim and proper, and he had his act together, and here I come in, and he says, well, I would like to offer you a job, but I want you to be inside, not driving a truck. Now, just let me say, this is not how you respond on a job interview. I laughed at him, and I said, you must be crazy. I said, I'm not creative. He said, I think you are. Well, all of this started building up something new. So here at this agency, I learned how to do some design. I learned how to do video production. I learned how to do a lot of things, a lot of copywriting. Well, I left there and got into the music business. Yep, moved here to Nash Vegas and did that for 30 years and learned a whole lot about audio and video production. The director of this program, Stan, and I worked with some of the same people. I helped launch the careers of DC Talk and Rebecca St. James and Audio Adrenaline, worked with DeGarmo and Key for several years, worked with Denise Williams, a lot of people. I got a lot of gold and platinum albums on my wall. But I got out of it because there just wasn't enough. I had a lot of success, but there wasn't enough. And I was working for a band called Newsboys, and they said, well, why don't you come work for us and be part of our nonprofit, Global Tribe? And I thought, well, that's new. I'd like to try that. What do you do? Well, they would work in Mexico helping single mothers that were living in poverty. So I went on board as their executive director, learned a whole lot about 501c3s, learned how to apply for one because theirs needed some repair. And so for 3 years I did that, and things started slowing down, and I knew it was time to change. I was sitting in church one Sunday morning, and I had to sit on the front row because somebody took my second row seat. Every Sunday, I sit on the second row inside the aisle so I can get up and help if there's anything important going on. You still retain some skills. But at any rate, I had to sit on the front row, and I was praying. What do I do? Serve and Protect came to mind. No joke. I went home and put the plan together and filed my own 501c3, created our first website, created our first mobile app. I happened to find a template on Facebook. And the point that I'm making, throughout my life, every step of the way, for 41 years, God was preparing me to get out of my comfort zone and do something he had been planning all along. And that's my belief, that in 1970, he knew that 2011 would come. And he wanted me to have the skills that it took to get there and to do what he wanted to do. My initial thought was, well, I'm a chaplain, so with the FOP, why don't I just recruit a bunch of chaplains that have been cops? It's a good idea. And I got a call from a guy named Sean Riley with Safe Call Now. Sean said, do you have a crisis line? Well, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I did call one and offered to partner with them. They said if I had $1 million, they'd go national. And I said to that person, if I've got $1 million, what do I need you for? At which point we hung up. And Sean says, I'm in Washington State, but I want to go national too. Why don't we do this together? And since that day, he's been our crisis line. And we have worked with more than 5,000 people on our side that we've helped. But the point that I'm making is every step of the way, the right connection was made, and I had no clue what the plan was. I actually had a guy that was a friend of mine said, can you not keep one job? Can you not focus on one career? And I said, man, I don't get it. I mean, I'm trying, but I don't get it. And so with all of those skills, with 30 years of marketing and public relations and all of that stuff, I learned how to do a 501c3, and we launched. For 5 years, I did this alone, helped more than 3,000 people. And it was driving me crazy because I was the only one. So I was doing the phone calls, finding the therapist, looking how we would do fundraising, looking at marketing, looking at building a network. And there was just so much. It was overwhelming. And as the time went on, Dr. Carrie Steiner, she called me one day. She said, I know you don't know who I am. She introduced herself. I've been handing out your materials for a long time. I just print them off of your website. And she said, are you okay with that? I said, no. How about I send you actual materials that are nice quality and you can hand those out? And that's what she started doing. And so she became on as one of our board members. But we've had peer advocates that hear about what we're doing. You know, former or active police officers and firefighters. Nick called and said, hey, listen, I'd like to be part of what you're doing. Told me what he does. Even Vinny standing in the back there. That's a God thing. Vinny he's one of our peer advocates, just getting out of training. And he said, I want to, what do you do? We talked about it. He goes, I'm New York City police. I retired. I said, uh-oh, might have one here. And he talked about going through the Stevens ministry training, which is incredible. He's one of our peer advocates. Jenny sitting in the back by Nick. We met years ago when she called up to just talk. She's one of our peer advocates. But you see, I never recruited one of those. And that's an awesome thing. And the whole point in this side of the symposium, the whole end result, is that from beginning to end, it's all about God. It's all about what He's doing in each of our lives. Now, when somebody calls up and they say, I need to get some help, you don't understand what I'm going through. And the way we handle that is we'll talk with them for a minute and say, by the way, do you come from a faith background? Well, if they say yes, we take a certain approach. But if they say no, we just keep talking with them as they talk with us, because it's not our role to go out and force something on anybody that doesn't want to know anything about it. In time, if God wants them to do that, they'll ask questions. But this is what we do, and I thank you for being here. It's been a long day. You've heard a lot of information. I hope it's been helpful, and thank you all for being here.